Curt alcoholic.
Hey, Curt.
My sobriety date is 3/27/89, and I think I'm going to shift it up a little bit. I'm going to talk about the night my brother got his DUI, because we were always worried when he left drunk and what was going to happen. And as many times as we tried to keep his keys and all that other stuff, you know how we drunks are. You know, we're determined, and I did the same thing. And but we get a call, and he had ran off the road near his place up in Clearview, and luckily he didn't kill anybody or hit anybody. He ran up on some neighbor's lawn, and they called the cops on him. And so he called me, and me and my stepson got in the car, and we went to find him. And ironically enough, we were able to maneuver with the bail bondsman up in Everett. And we were at the corner of Pacific and Broadway in Everett, right near the jail. And my brother had gotten out, they let him out because the bail bondsman had bailed him out. I vouched for it. And he was standing in the parking lot of the Travel Lodge up there. He's on the phone, and he goes, "Did you bail me out?" I said, "Yeah." And I'm looking at him. I'm right at the light there. So he jumped in the car, and that's kind of what happened with him. And so far he's sticking with it. But as some of us may do, I went back and tried to trace, well, where did I first have my first drink? And my grandparents lived about a block from Ballard High School. And as we always did, the family used to get together on holidays, and they'd always play poker, penny ante poker, or whatever the amount was at that time. But I remember taking as a young kid, taking little sips of beer or whiskey out of my grandparents' drinks. And so I traced it back to that was the first time that I remember tasting alcohol. And then, because I always thought, I jumped ahead, my brother alluded a little bit, but we had a house on Crown Hill for 45 years, and my dad would have mom and dad would have these parties in the family room just right outside of our daylight basement. And when we'd wake up the next morning, all these glasses are sitting there with half empty drinks. And I was sitting there thinking, well, maybe that was the reason we tasted it, was because of the 7-Up or the Collins mix or whatever else. But it probably had more to do than the alcohol than I thought, now. And but let's see, in the generation I grew up, we all had the V8 hot cars, and quite frankly, back then we were supposed to drink and drive, because the penalties weren't that bad, and you used to get a slap on the wrist. And in fact, you can decipher on some of these things I'm going to tell you whether or not alcohol had anything to do with it or not. But my best friend, who died of drugs and alcohol at the age of 40, and I'm 71. His dad had a state patrol car, refurbished state patrol car with the spotlight on it, and we used to dress up with these blue long sleeve shirts, and we'd drive around pulling people off, drunk, pulling people over, and he'd get out of his car with his paper route ticket book and try to write him tickets. And I remember distinctly, because I was there, he gets out and he's got these frayed cutoffs. And he goes up to one car, and the lady looks out, she goes, what are you doing in cutoffs? He says, "Oh, summer uniform, man." But that's just part of the drinking. Part of the things I would tell you is that remembering back now with our history, the common denominator, I don't care if we were going to go to a party, if we were going to play poker, if we were going to go cruising, whatever it was, it was always, let's go get the booze and then we'll decide what we're going to do. And so I know that now, what the common denominator is. But there, I think that the reason I can relate, I would probably hire an alcoholic before anybody else because I know where I came from. And I say things like this because you get to recognize who you are. And I've always been a high achiever for some reason. And it wasn't because I was trying to strive with that. It was probably more of my low self-esteem that made me endure. I would tell you things like I played at Ingram High School for 3 years, undefeated. I humbly tell you that I was picked the best guy in my position in all the teams in Seattle, which I'm going to tell you about. I used to work for the Black Angus restaurant chain for 20 years. I ran their #1 store out of 120 restaurants. When they awarded the best district manager, I got the award. And I say those things because there's something driven about, I don't know, self-worth or something that kept me going. And, but here's another story. On our graduating night at Ingram High School, big kegger out on the baseball diamond, and I don't know how many of us, maybe 100 people. There used to be right on 125th and Aurora, there was this big, tall Midas muffler man on a trailer. And about 100 of us got together, drunk, and we went over there and we were going to bring it to the high school. And sure enough, we had about halfway to the school, towing all these guys towing on a trailer. We had guys with 2x4s lifting the wires up because they were so, we couldn't get the trailer under it. But we got about halfway to the school, then the cops came, made us take it back, no harm, no foul. And so we did that. And then, because some lady had looked out her window. And back then on Friday night, there was always a monster movie. She sees this thing coming down the street. And, but 7 of us at 2 a.m. went back and we got that thing. And we ended up towing it. We had it right next to the high school. And a cop car came around the corner with its lights off, lit them up. And 6 of us got away, but 1 guy got caught. And what had happened was they didn't press any charges because they got so much publicity out of the whole thing that it just brought a lot of business our way. I could tell you from high school, I went to Everett and played football at Everett Community College. And why I'm doing this, I tried to drink a whole bottle of Everclear and didn't finish it because I remember still sitting. Why would I do that? I was by myself, and it's, I don't know, is it 90 proof? I can't even remember, but let's see. After high school, I ended up, me and 3 guys moved to San Jose, California. And we were opening up another Black Angus restaurant down there. And we were only busboys and dishwashers, things of that effect. And I was down there for 6 months because back then they had the military lottery draft on the TV, and I was number 53. So I knew I was going to Vietnam, and so I had to come back up to Seattle after 6 months to get my register and physical and all that other stuff. But they ended up not taking me because I had a cartilage taken on my left knee from football. And see, I would tell you that that's probably God watching out for me way back then, because I know my personality, I would have tried to win the war myself. And a lot of guys didn't make it back, and a lot of them that didn't make it back weren't all themselves. I'll tell you, these are one of those stories that you had to have been there to believe it. But we're down there working for this Sicilian manager that had trained up in Seattle for the Black Angus, and somehow there was four of us living there. One guy was at work, and three of us were kind of out front, and we got caught up with all these Hell's Angels. And they tried them. They muscled us into our apartment, two-bedroom apartment, because they wanted a place to drink and do their drugs. And so I ended up kind of staying awake, and I called the other guy that lived with us and tell him what was going on. You know, the Hell's Angel here. What are we going to do? Just to kind of warn him. And what happened is that they all ended up passing out, including my other two roommates, from doing too much drinking and drugging. And a little while later after that, I get a knock on the door, and I open the door, and these two big Italian guys in tuxedos are sitting there. And they say, "Are you Curt?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, Peroni, who's the manager we were working for, sent us over to make sure you're okay." And so I'm sitting there dealing with the mafia and the Hells Angels on the same night, and live to tell the story, huh? But let's see. When I was 19, I had a guy that had two one-way tickets from Seattle to London. And so for $100, so I ended up that I went to grade school and high school. So I went to we flew over together to Europe, and I hitchhiked around Europe by myself. Well, we split up right when we first got to London and traveled. You know, nobody's going to pick up a guy hitchhiking. Like I said, how did I do all this stuff? I was sleeping in cornfields. I can tell you distinctly, I was on student standby waiting to get from Luxembourg to the United States. And I had to stay, I had this poncho pup tent, and I was in the middle of the woods, dark out, it was raining, because I had to wait for my turn on the student standby. And all of these German Shepherds I know now came up. And I thought, coming from that area, I thought they were wolves or wolfman or some darn thing. And but I ended up taking a plane and land. The only time I've been to New York, we landed in New York just long enough so I could take a bus ride to Montreal, Canada, and I took a three-day train ride and then dropped back into Seattle where I was born. Let's see, also, and my brother was there, over on Fremont, 105th and Fremont. 8 of us rented this, I'll call it a party house, beat up old party house. There was 8 of us there, and the total rent was $160. So it only cost us $20 a month to live there. And we're sitting there. I guess this is part of the drinking thing. We had kegs going on. We're in a residential neighborhood. Live band, music so loud, and all of a sudden 20 cop cars and a police helicopter with a spotlight shows up. And, again, it's a crazy thinking you're not we could care less about what the neighbors thought. And I ended up, me and this other guy got handcuffed and arrested, taken downtown to Seattle. And then my brother and another guy got arrested, and they were in a different cop car. And he was headed to Seattle. But my dad was a fireman. And he was able to get over to the police station before my brother got arrested. So let's see. Here's a part that I've never told anybody, but I think I figured it out. I'm on my 5th marriage, and I'm married about 3.5 years now to a wonderful gal, and she's never had a drink. She's 66 years old. But the previous 4 marriages, I always wondered. I mean, it's not anything proud to talk about. But in this program, you can tell the truth and be comfortable with that. And I My first marriage was I'd owned a house in Edmonds, had my own 9-story parking garage downtown Seattle. I was still working for Black Angus on the weekends as a host, and I tried to get on the pipeline up in Alaska to make a bunch of money, and somehow they built a Black Angus. It was called Cattle Company then, and so me and my wife moved up there to Alaska. And I'm not blaming her for any of this stuff, but I thought I was a loyal, trusting husband, and she uh, ended up getting into cocaine and snorting up everything I owned. I had to sell the house, and that was my first marriage. And then without describing the other three, I'd realized that I was probably um, marrying these women because I was familiar with my mom's behavior, who was an alcoholic. Uh, that's what makes sense to me today because, and then I was single for about 14, 15 years, and then I married the gal I got now. And, um, and at the time I was 65. Why would a 65-year-old man go get married again? But I'm happy. You do the next best thing in front of you. But my mom was an alcoholic, but I would have never known that because the house was always clean. She was a stay-at-home mom. My dad was a fireman, always a good provider. And maybe there wasn't as much love in the household as far as that loving feeling goes. But I've realized that I'm able to take what the good things that they taught me. My mom taught us good values, and my dad taught us a great work ethic, and it shows through. The other side of the coin is all three of their kids. I got me and my brother, and we've got a younger sister, have all had relationship problems and addiction problems. And so you can see the patterns of different things looking back for me. And um, so, let's see what I'm going to say. Anyhow, I worked for the Black Angus restaurant chain for 20 years. And um, um, I can tell you, this is how embarrassing it can get. We were down in California at a business meeting with all the managers, and the night I won this Best District Manager Award, I had to go up and give a speech, and I was so happy that when we got to the closest Black Angus near there, I ended up going around to all the guys in the place and kissing them, and one of my managers had to drag me out of there. But I mean, you could say, isn't that crazy, stupid behavior? And I can tell you, Stuart Anderson, when he came to town, down there they called it a Rose Festival parade, and he would bring his wagon and his Clydesdale horses down there, and of course I was riding in the wagon with him, and I was in charge to make sure that ice chest was full of screwdrivers, which is what he liked to drink. And there was one parade one year where he couldn't make it because of the something about turbulence, or he couldn't fly in. And I had this silver-haired guy at the restaurant in Gresham, Oregon, and we had him dress up as Stuart Anderson. Kind of looked like him. Put the cowboy stuff on, sat in the wagon, and we pulled it off. Resourceful. That's what I mean about we alcoholics are pretty. We figure things out pretty well because we've had to survive all this. I can tell you in the Eugene location, for you guys that don't know that, they used to throw in this whole tray of baked potatoes with foil wrapped around them, getting ready for the 4:00 rush. You put them in at 3, and then they're ready to go at 4. And what had happened was these people came in for dinner, and they forgot to turn the oven on. And I happened to be down there running. You know what I do? I mean, this is just. I thought it was pretty creative. I jumped in my car and went over to the Wendy's drive-through, who were were selling baked potatoes at the time, and bought two. And by the time, we could, the show must go on. Let's see. I had to when I was in Oregon. That particular district, they had a big golf tournament every year and I was there from '82 to '89. I had to run the golf tournament, and everybody from the whole company used to come in, all the vendors, everything else. It was a big deal. It was a big party, but it was a lot of meetings also. It stretched out about for 3 days, and and again, I'm always trying to come up with something, a twist, and so we're having the banquet that night in this banquet room that seats about 500, and we were able to discover that the next door in the hotel, the orangutan from Every Which Way Was Loose was there. And so we were able to go over and talk them into bringing them into the banquet and put his arm around Stuart Anderson, and just trying to be creative and fun and do something different. So now I'm going to tell you I'd separated from my wife and got my own condo when I was down in Oregon. And I wasn't raised in church, but in that condo one day, and some of you guys that know me have heard this story numerous times, but I looked at the ceiling of my condo and said, God, is this all there is? And that continues to be divinely profound for me, because why would I ask that question? And a week later, 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, Freeway 205 in Oregon, I passed out at the wheel and totaled my car. And I should be dead or killed somebody or something. In fact, the cops didn't even come. I hitchhiked down the road and got a tow truck. He hooked up my car, dropped me off my condo, and I never saw my car again. So I'm in my condo. I'm calling all my restaurants like I normally do. And I broke down crying. And I ended up calling my parents, calling my boss. And my parents came down, and my dad got me out of that whole condo, which I still don't know how he did it. And I ended up going into a treatment for 2 weeks. And like I said, every morning, the first thing we did at 6:30 was to go across to an AA meeting at this old beat-up house called Scully's. And I was telling Steve here that, 30 years later, I went back down there, and they had moved it into another Victorian-type house. And, I remember what it was like, thriving, and that's probably the reason the treatment centers brought everybody over there. But I ended up going into this house. It was dark. All the drapes were closed. About 6 people. And I thought they'd be excited to hear some guy that got, started his sobriety here. But they could care less. But, it just, things change. And so I'm in treatment for 2 weeks, and I ended up, when I got out, and I know the 2 guys that did it, but they had me in a crowded restaurant. They ended up firing me after 20 years. And I've never been bitter about it. I remember walking away from the table and telling them I would have paid for the car, and I was shedding a few tears when I walked away. And I ended up leaving. So then I hung around in Oregon for a little while. I ended up giving people rides to from the treatment center to these meetings. And but then eventually there was nothing left for me. My wife was having multiple affairs, and I was trying to get sober. I lost my job, wrecked the car. So when I moved to Seattle, I left my kids that were 10 and 14 at the time there. And I still struggle with it a little bit, but both of them have turned out to be so damn good. It's amazing. I probably had my priorities straight because what I did is I put sobriety first, and I trusted that, and I've been able to practice that, and and I've got a great relationship with both of them. My daughter is successfully married, happily married 28 years. I got 4 grandkids from the age of 17 through 22. And my son is married for 8 years, living in Vegas, doing real well. Um, but and the only way I can figure this out is that you know I ended up remodeling an old biker bar in the Skagit Valley, and I turned it into a nice restaurant, breakfast, lunch, dinner, live entertainment 6 nights a week with karaoke on Monday nights, dancing. Now, why would an alcoholic, go do that? I'm changing geography, I'm changing jobs, changing relationships. And so I don't know. That's the only thing I can figure out that makes any sense to me, that because I was in that business, that maybe that's why I was able to, or maybe because I was ready. I knew when I looked at the ceiling of that condo of mine and said, God, is this all there is? There was something wrong with me. I just didn't know what it was. And God led me to AA, and I've been here ever since. I've never gone back out and had another drink. But that 4.5 years up there, I had an AA meeting in my place every Tuesday. I helped different guys that were drunks get sober from time to time. And so, how was I able to endure that? I don't know. I can tell you, before I even opened the doors up there, I almost threw in the towel. I ended up, whatever was going on with me in that first year of sobriety, stress. I was suing my old company, Black Angus. Of course, like I told you, my kids were in Oregon. I'm trying to run this business. And I didn't almost open the doors, but I ended up wise enough to go see a counselor. I went to a counselor 7 times, and she basically taught me, why do you have to be so, you don't have to be so drastic. And she ended up giving me this book, Pause, Post-Alcoholic Withdrawal Syndrome. And when I read that, it's exactly like the same way that when I read the big book. It's wisdom and it's knowledge, and that gave me enough comfort to realize that what I was going through was normal. And I ended up going on Prozac for a couple of months, and I haven't had to take anything since then. But then God was probably watching out for us again, because my brother was a partner in this business, this restaurant, and he ended up, after 4.5 years, luckily we were able to sell it. The business was thriving, but 2 married couples bought the business from us. Neither couple had been in the business, and it was a disaster, and eventually it went under. But then I ended up, I moved into my brother's house. He had a 2-bedroom brick house over on the Bonfire Road Highway, and he ended up, I remember, he gave me a room and let me stay there. And the story goes, because we've talked about it many times, the company, his company at the time was Brad Johnson Construction. And then, I'm sitting there in my same corny ways. I ended up going buying some blueberry muffins and making coffee for my brother and his one employee. And I wrote down, I said, here's some energy muffins for the Paint Rangers. And my brother liked that name, and he ended up having a logo designed. And we went on very successful company. We had 7 trucks and 30 employees. Both of us are hardworking. I was telling you earlier, the work ethic that we learned from my dad. And And then eventually I thought I had enough money, and I sold my house in Clearview and ended up moving down to Woodland, Washington, and helping my daughter and her husband build their dream house. And then eventually he lost his job and had to move to Arizona. So I moved down to Arizona for 4.5 months, but it was just too hot for me. And I moved back to Seattle, shoreline area, and I came into the Phoenix Club, which was right next to McDonald's in the year 2013. And the noon meeting there was really not that big of a deal. And in fact, I didn't go that often because there was hardly anybody there. And again, this is not how great I am, but I ended up bringing a box of donuts that turned into a pot of soup that turned into, I ended up cooking Monday through Friday, putting out a whole kind of buffet. And instead of going from just a few people, we built it up to 50, sometimes 60 people. And I don't know how I did it because, our club ended up closing down over COVID for a couple of years. And we are now in a new location just a half a block up the road. And I secretary the Wednesday meeting. And I do the same thing there. I put out this big buffet on Wednesdays. And I look back and I said, how could I have done that 5 days a week? Because this is hard, But to me, it's about service work. I sponsor about 10 guys. I try to chip in and help where I can. We got a Memorial Day picnic from 2 to 4 coming up, and I'm going to work the broiler with a couple other guys, and I'm bringing a couple of crock pots of mac and cheese and a big Caesar salad. And but you can lead by example. My brother would probably attest to you. I don't think I've ever preached to him. I just was myself. And there's something about being yourself when you're sober that you can lead by example, and just continue to do the right thing. I mean, I'm no better than anybody in here or him or anybody else. We're all alcoholics, and I say, my best lessons have been coming to AA. I've learned more in there than any other place I've gone to, college, business experience, or anything, because the way we treat each other, the lessons, all of that's just great. And so I'm still doing it. I'm going to get. I plan on doing it as long as I can live. It's I say this once in a while, but you guys know the problems of drugs and alcohol out there, and I'm not going to solve the world. But what greater organization to be with than this one? To be able to come in and do your part and help where you can, and the great thing about helping other alcoholics, it keeps me sober. The end.